Hello and welcome to Moneylife. This is Sucheta Dalal. Today we are going to talk about something a little different, not electoral bonds, not the usual politics, not even business as usual. In fact, some of you may have read headlines in the newspapers about an international arbitration award which slapped massive damages on someone we know very well, which is Mr. M. Damodaran, former chairman of the Securities and Exchange Board of India, who is also the founder of Excellence Enablers, an organization that champions good governance. He's on the board of many listed companies. Now, when someone of his eminence is slapped with the 206 crore damages by what is called an international court, it makes you sit up. Strangely, when you begin to look at the story, it's not at all about Mr. Damodaran, and it is still worrying enough for us to make a video blog. It's about Indian entrepreneurs, well-placed ones, what they face, and what could be the consequences, especially if they have global ambitions. The company here is something called Glocal Healthcare. So the story starts on 21st March. Like I said, there were news reports about Mr. Damodaran being hit with damages of 206 crores by the International Court of Arbitration of the US in connection with a breach of contract issue. Now, anything that says International Court, US, we think there's a lot of substance to it. It turns out that 206 was just part of total damages of 110.2 million. That's nearly about 918-19 crore against a bunch of directors of this company called Glocal Healthcare. You've not heard about Glocal Healthcare. It's a private limited company, and you're wondering why it's making such big news. Now look at the story. This sum, first of all, was arrived at on the basis of hypothetical losses suffered by a US company called UpHealth Incorporated and its 100% subsidiary UpHealth Holdings, which is what we are going to refer to in this whole video blog. I'm going to keep calling it UpHealth. Similarly, Glocal Healthcare, I'm going to call it Glocal. It is a company based in the northeast of India. Nothing about this is as straightforward as it looks with what I have said so far. In fact, it's more like peeling an onion and coming up with new facts. Glocal, it turns out, is a first-generation entrepreneur. But before that, let's talk about the deal. So Glocal, an Indian company, UpHealth, a foreign company. UpHealth talked to Glocal through a bunch of directors and said, why not go global with what you're doing? What is Glocal? It runs hospitals and it has used digital technology in a way to reach healthcare to the poorest people of India. And obviously after COVID, this had significance all over the world because everyone needed to use technology in the manner that was sort of invented by this Indian company in India. So on 30th October 2020, UpHealth of the US and Glocal had signed a share purchase agreement. Under this, at that time, UpHealth was supposed to bring in a total of crore and acquire a stake in the Indian company. In fact, not as straightforward as that because there was going to be a share purchase agreement which gave local shareholders shares in the US company. And in fact, at one time, the CEO of Glocal was supposed to head the international operations. Now, UpHealth alleges that Indian directors got the money but failed to give up control. They were paid full consideration. Glocal, on the other hand, says it cancelled the share purchase agreement with UpHealth on discovering that it had been deceived, defrauded to part with its shares under various pretexts. It has since filed first information reports with the police. It is in court in the Calcutta High Court. And the deal is so complex. It's a typical US transaction, which I'm not going to go into. It is there up on the net. And those of you who are interested in real details are bound to go and look for it. Now let's come to who and what is Glocal that this US company is so interested in it. Glocal, like I said, is a social enterprise. It was set up in 2010 by Dr. Sahabat Azim. He was previously a Tripura cadre, Indian Administrative Services officer, IS officer also a doctor. Why did he leave the IAS and start this? He apparently felt impelled to do this after his father's death due to unnecessary surgery at an expensive hospital. So obviously, if this can happen to someone as connected as him, you can imagine what happens to others. So his aim was to make healthcare affordable to rural and remote areas of India using technology, artificial intelligence for diagnosis and design, not just through digital OPDs and the kind that you've heard during COVID, but also the design of the hospital itself in a manner that a remote doctor can actually reach people, look at issues, conduct tests, and dispense or talk about the line of treatment. Started out with one hospital in 2010 in West Bengal. Today it has 11 hospitals, many of them having hundreds of beds. It has 500 digital dispensaries. It's got a telemedicine platform. All this is in the economically backward states of the Northeast. In 2019, it broke even. 2020, we had the pandemic. The importance of these kind of digital dispensaries and things, like I said, went global and attracted the attention through a couple of Indian partners of this company called UpHealth Inc. UpHealth at that time was called Gig Capital 2. Glocal believed that UpHealth's intricate financial maneuvers would help bring in foreign funding and give Glocal itself a global footprint. Now, who doesn't want to go global if you're on a social mission, if you can reach? And you've seen what happened during COVID all over the world. Now, without going into details of what really happened, Glocal transferred shares on the basis of promises because UpHealth wanted to list. By this time, it had changed its name from Gig Capital 2 to UpHealth, wanted to list in the US market, and it wanted certain transactions done. So based on promissory notes and based on things that everything's going to be fine, the money is going to come after the listing, things were signed. UpHealth was even listed in the US market on 9 June 2021. At that time, its combined value was shown as US dollars 1.35 billion. Things started going wrong immediately after. The price collapsed dramatically to half within a month of listing and to less than $1 within a year. Indian shareholders naturally were upset. They still didn't know how bad things were, but they refused to accept what now seemed like dud shares. And these shares also needed them to seek permission from the Reserve Bank of India. They refused. They said, we don't want these shares in exchange for our shares. They would want money to be infused. UpHealth had also promised other investments. This was not the only one. Even that did not materialize. But now, because of things, promissory notes and transfers that had done before, it said, we have a 94% shareholding in Glocal Healthcare. It had actually paid only 13%, but it wanted to take control. In 2021, things had moved to the extent that Dr. Azim had relocated to Dubai and he was going to be called the CEO of UpHealth's international operations. This was a ploy to make him step down from Glocal. Obviously, things were going wrong when the share price collapsed, money wasn't coming in, tensions escalated. But the flashpoint was when UpHealth appointed a very well-known consulting firm and said, do a valuation of the Indian business. And while doing the valuation of these 11 hospitals at 500 digital dispensaries, Glocal discovered that the land on which these hospitals were being built was being valued as agricultural land. That means it was deliberately being shown as much lower than the real value. So they smelt a rat and they filed a first information report. They accused 2 of their directors of data theft and misuse of funds. And by then it was war, things were going to court. Meanwhile, UpHealth began to pressure management to take charge. They wanted 2 directors replaced by their own people. And this is when the Damodaran story comes in because he was on the board, he holds shares, and he refused to agree. So they invoked international arbitration despite opposition by Glocal. They got court approval for it and went ahead. Glocal contends that this is fraud. So there is no question of arbitration when they have been the victim of fraud. Now, Coming to UpHealth, like I said, US-based global digital health firm, wholly owned subsidiary of UpHealth Holdings, which we're talking about, which is dealing with Glocal healthcare. To summarize the complex financial transactions, UpHealth had pledged to bring in 459 million to expand operations. Initially a direct investment, then talks shifted towards a merger, and Glocal was supposed to receive shares. Share purchase agreement was signed. UpHealth at that time showed that it had 174 million in trust funds, and it was supposed to bring in another 210 in, for which it had a letter of intent from a company called Gem Capital. Now, these complex financial dealings are all going to land in court, so I'm not going to get into it. It will eventually go to the Supreme Court of India before it's decided. But let's look at what a Google search throws up on UpHealth. As recently as September 23rd, UpHealth filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy proceedings in the Delaware Court of the US. This happened after a New York court had ordered it to pay 31.34 million to a company called Needham and Company LLC for breach of contract. So after this order, when it had to pay 31 million, it filed for bankruptcy, which seems to suggest that it's on thin ground financially. What is worse, this is not the first time that UpHealth has been accused of shady dealings. In fact, other founders with which it had similar deals, it had set up a host of companies like Gig Capital 2 was dealing with Glocal. It had Gig Capital 1, Gig Capital 2, Capital 3, Gig Capital 4, Gig Capital 5. And most of these were involved in disputes with the founders with whom they were going to do deals. And in many cases, there were allegations of founders being misled, strung along, pushed into disadvantageous, value destructive deals. Many of them also went for bankruptcy. On the other hand, like I said, UpHealth alleges that Glocal healthcare breached contractual obligations by not giving up control. So litigation continues. There is an international arbitration ruling. So what is this International Court of Arbitration? Is it really even a court? So it turns out that although it's referred to as a court, ICA is not even a judicial body. It's part of the International Chamber of Commerce. That means it's a private entity. And this order itself is an ex parte order because Glocal did not participate in the arbitration. So to get it enforced, it has to come back to Indian courts, who will hopefully give a fair hearing. ICA also, even in this order, with such a big ruling of damages, hasn't got any significant negative finding of wrongdoing, except failure to participate in arbitration, which is a usual clause in deals like this. Why did it make headlines? Like I said earlier, because of Mr. Damodaran's involvement. So Damodaran happens to be a Tripura Kada IS officer. He supported Dr. Azim. He has a 22.54% stake in Glocal. And the allegation against him is simple, that he failed to use his influence to push a resolution that 3 of UpHealth directors should come on the board. And in fact, he voted against it. As simple as that. Now, the case is going to wind its way through court. But look at the larger issue here. Glocal is in many ways better placed than most entrepreneurs. It's not a young IIT IIM. Here is an IAS officer, a doctor with experience in administration, recognized around the world for the work he's done. In fact, the World Economic Forum at Davos has invited him as a speaker in 2021. His board of directors includes a former SEBI chairman. Now, if this can happen to a company like Glocal stumbles, it's a chilling lesson for Indian entrepreneurs. In a nation, look at the business it's in. It's on a social mission to provide healthcare in a country where 28% of the population lacks access to doctors. Hospitals are scarce. And Dr. Azim's work is entirely in states like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Orissa, and West Bengal, which are economically backward and hence invaluable. So doctors in India, most of you know, are reluctant to work in rural areas. And there are very few who are in the position or have the savvy and the resources to use technology in digitally enabled clinics that combine examination rooms, test labs, pharmacies with remote medical support. A disempowered part of the country needed this. While Glocal prepares for battle, it's vital that the police and the judiciary deliver justice. I'm not saying they should deliver in favor of them, but you need a quick hearing and quick decisions, and for this to end while an entrepreneur is still able to stand up and fight. If this one fails, what is the chance that other entrepreneurs with global ambitions are going to be able to do well for themselves? Anytime they meet with an obstacle, they can get caught up in litigation, which is never ending. It'll be interesting to watch what happens, but what we know is that it'll be good if the northeast of India has access to this kind of organization. Thank you.